He says, well, Paulie, how, everything okay with you? I said, yes. I said, it's beautiful. I said, how do you feel? He said, Paulie, I feel real good now. Let's go back.
Lugosi's debilitating physical condition led to pitiful bouts of despair. On an out-of-town publicity tour for a film made for another director, actor Tor Johnson had to intervene to save the actor from himself.
They were doing the public relations for Black Sleep. Lugosi had been misbehaving, apparently, with the bottle as the story went, and he had this mad impulse to throw himself out the window. And Tor had to keep him from doing it, and did so several times.
In April of 1955, emaciated, sick, and depressed, Lugosi voluntarily commits himself to Metropolitan State Hospital for the treatment of his addiction. Perversely, he alerts the press himself. Nationwide headlines result, but Lugosi is pulled from the brink while in rehab and is released in better health than he's been in years. Early in 1956, Ed Wood came into some cash from an investor, just enough to shoot a day's worth of silent footage with Lugosi in his Dracula cape. Among the locations, a cemetery, and this house in Sylmar, California, the home of actor Tor Johnson at the time.
The grief of his wife's death became greater and greater agony.
I remember the first day shooting on this, he only had $900, not even enough to do a day's shooting in those days. But he went to Kodak, bought the negative, and off we went. Got a hold of Bela Lugosi, who was at that time a very close friend of his, and started improvising and shooting with what we had.
Contrary to accounts published since, this scant footage was shot with no particular storyline in mind. It would be the basis for Ed Wood's most infamous film, but not until after unexpected tragedy strikes. On August 16th, 1956, Bela Lugosi is dead.
No, Dracula never ends. I don't know whether I shall call it a fortune or a cause, but it never ends.
Well, at the funeral, which was at a parlor kind of catty-cornered from on Hollywood Boulevard from Pantages Theater, I arrived somewhat early. I don't believe there was anybody in the parlor at the moment, and he was lying in his casket, and I just stood there for about 5 minutes, sort of reminiscing about him. And I know the thought passed my mind that in case he was hovering around in spirit form, I thought, well, Bailey, I think you'll be very pleased with your last performance.
Ed was pretty broken up because of several reasons. One, that was probably his best friend at the time. And two, he had a lot of projects planned using Bela.
And there's this strange story that when his body was being transported up to Hollywood Boulevard, it was supposed to go to the right, and somehow or other, almost like a magnet, he was drawn down Hollywood Boulevard as though he were saying farewell to his film world.
Lugosi requested in his will that he be buried in one of the capes he wore in Dracula. He was. These are the Mariposa apartments in Hollywood where Ed Wood was living in 1956. Now that Bela was gone, Ed was at a loss for what to do next. Searching his imagination for inspiration, a daring, even crazy idea began to take hold. What if he were to make a film with his old friend, despite the fact that Bela was no longer among the living?
I thought it was quite wonderful that I played opposite a dead man. That, very strange. Very strange, isn't it, to proceed with the movie even though the star is dead.
He'd be drinking his vodka, typing like crazy, smoking a cigarette, got the television on, all at one time. Then there'd be company around, and I don't know how he did it, and talk like this and type, and you sit there and you say, oh my goodness, oh, can't believe it, a dynamo.
This is what's left of the cemetery used for the establishing shots in Plan 9 from outer space. When Ed Wood first wrote the script, he did so under the more lurid title, Grave Robbers from Outer Space. Written in less than 2 weeks, Grave Robbers tells a tale of aliens who plan to take over the Earth by marching our own reanimated dead upon our major cities.
Plan 9. Ah, yes. Plan 9 deals with the resurrection of the dead. Long-distance electrode shot into the pineal and pituitary glands of recent dead.
He liked science fiction. Now, when Planet 9 was made, or Gravediggers, there was a run of people calling in they've seen saucers. He would capitalize on the behavior and the topic of the day.
I think Ed Wood in himself was influenced by something from the 1930s, from Startling Stories, a pulp magazine, which had a similar theme of grave robbers robbing corpses from outer space.
If he had a storyboard, and I thought, no, that's not the way he worked. He worked like decoupage. It's like if you're making a patchwork quilt. You've got this piece and that piece, and you sew it all, stitch it all together. And it's different from designing a pattern in a sketch and saying, I'm going to do a fleur-de-lis, and then around that will be a sunburst. And that would be having a storyboard if you start with a master design. I don't think he didn't start with a master design. He grabbed what was handy and stuck it onto something else that was available, and so it grew.
Armed with his footage of Bella and his patchwork script, Ed raised a bit more money and did a little more shooting, but soon shut down production to look for more investors. It wasn't until he met a man named Ed Reynolds, who managed the apartment complex Ed was living in, that he found his primary investor.
Ed Reynolds was actually the only contact that I had with Plan 9, Grave Robbers from Outer Space, the original title. Ed Reynolds came out to the West Coast, and he and his wife joined a little small church on Cynthia Street near Doheny, near Beverly Hills. And my wife and I, we had just been married, and we lived across the street from the church in a little cottage on Weatherly Drive, and we went to that church occasionally, and that was where I met Ed Reynolds.
Ed Reynolds himself appears in Plan 9 as a gravedigger. That's him on the right.
One day he came to me about a year or two later, excited that he had raised some money. He was going to make a film starring Bela Lugosi. And he wanted me to be the young leading man in the film. And I said to Ed, but Bela Lugosi is dead. He said, he reassured me that there was a very genius writer-director named Ed Wood, who had written a clever screenplay around some existing footage of Bela Lugosi, and he was going to use his chiropractor, who resembled Lugosi, to do the stand-in or the other scenes.
Dr. Tom Mason, who was indeed Ed Wood's chiropractor, had been a drinking buddy of Ed's since before Bela Lugosi died.
He used to go work on Ed because he never typed comfortably. He was sitting on the edge of the bed like this. There's the coffee table. Humped over is a typewriter like this. Phone is there. That's as far as it goes. Just like that. And he would have cramps like this, so he would come over and give him a massage or something on the vertebrae and pop his back or stuff. So, but I never did. Well, let's see, when he said Tom was going to do it, I said, God, the same thing you said, you know. He said, leave it to me, leave it to me. It's going to work, leave it to me. That's his way he says it. It's off. Dad knows who's talking. He said it, and he's doing it that way.
This is Bella, and this is Tom Mason in his characteristic cape-over-the-face pose. Their resemblance may have been minimal, but as far as Ed was concerned, it was close enough. Tom Mason would also take a role and put money into a later Ed Wood film, Night of the Ghouls.
Now I grow weary, weak. The strain of spanning the everlasting is so tiring. I say you want.
Mason died in 1980, but his wife, Margaret, still lives in Anaheim, California. Occasionally referring to her husband by his middle name, Bob, she offers this explanation of his role in Plan 9.
I'm Margaret Mason, and my husband was Dr. Thomas R. Mason, and he was a chiropractor, and he was also into a lot of psychology and stuff, and he had just met Bela Lugosi, which Bela Lugosi thought he looked like him because they both had ears that stuck out. Anyway, he was going to treat Bela Lugosi for his cocaine habit, which I don't know whether you want that on tape or not, but nevertheless, we went on a trip then, and when he came back, he was supposed to start with him. Well, while we were on the trip, we found out that Bela Lugosi had died. So then Bob was used as a substitute for Bela Lugosi in making of this Planet of the Ghouls, or whatever it was.
Harry Thomas, Plan 9's makeup artist, toiled on nearly all of Wood's productions. Some of his earlier creations were the little people in the Superman and the Mole Men episode of the Superman TV series.
When you were told about Ed Wood's intention to use this previously shot footage of Lugosi and to double him with Tom Mason, did you find this inventive, or did you feel that maybe it wouldn't work?
Well, I had the mixed emotions about that. I thought perhaps it would work. Mason did his best.
Was anything done to Tom Mason to make him look as much like Lugosi as possible?
Just his hair and his cape and his face, the sort of an imaginary profile or semblance of Lugosi. But there's not too much done. As a matter of fact, I can't remember ever doing anything for Mason along those lines because of this hidden face. I think any tall, slender person would have been adequate.
Well, did you watch any of the scenes with Bob in them being filmed?
Well, I just remember those where he was with the cape and all. And I've seen that many times on TV since his death, and I'd call up people and say I saw Bob on TV, and they thought I was nuts.
What did you tell me Ed Wood would end?
More smoke, more smoke. He was always hollering for more smoke.
The smoke Wood was calling for was to diffuse the glare of studio lights and give his tiny cemetery set atmosphere. Although Lugosi and Tom Mason are clearly dressed as Lugosi's legendary screen persona, Count Dracula, the character Lugosi plays in Plan 9 is not meant to be a vampire at all. Yet despite this, the screenplay refers to him as Dracula or the Dracula character throughout. The resulting confusion as one watches Plan 9 is one of its stranger incongruities, and one that connoisseurs of the film savor.
I was confused by that myself when I first read it. As I say, when I got the screenplay, it didn't make heads or tails of me, because I saw the words Dracula and this and that. I think that when Wood sat down to write the screenplay, he just wrote as fast as he could, and thinking of Bela Lugosi, he thought of Dracula, and he used that as a handle to just indicate what the scene was.
He always kept things going to where he could change the script right in the middle and do something else. And as long as his favorite expression was dramatic license, if he thought something would be passable without bringing too much criticism, okay, let it go. So Dracula was both a vampire and someone else in the same picture. So what? Nobody really paid that close attention.
Now bankrolled by Ed Reynolds and several of his fellow Baptists, Plan 9 entered its main period of production. The shooting schedule called for 5 days in the studio and 2 more days of various silent exteriors. The title change to Plan 9 was imposed by the Baptists, who felt the word grave robbers was sacrilegious. Also, Reynolds and company requested that Ed Wood and some of the cast be baptized before finally agreeing to fund the production. To keep the cash coming in, Ed agreed.
I think Reynolds suspected Ed being a drinker, because Reynolds himself was an alcoholic at one time. And when he got to know Ed Wood, he took a liking to Ed Wood. And he kind of thought, well, if he brought religion to him, might straighten his life out.
And he was duly baptized, and I was there the night that he was baptized, standing there resplendent in a white robe as he was immersed beneath the waters. And he also had, as I call, his menagerie of friends and actors and astrologers and ex-wives, and they began to, excuse me, they began to follow him to church. They had heard that there was a money man at that church who was going to bankroll Ed Wood in some films, and they decided, hey, we better get in on this. So they were there. And it was very amusing to see these face-to-face, odd Hollywood people sitting there with the old, sweet little old ladies in church on Sunday morning.
Tor Johnson got converted. So did I. And Tor's wife, Greta.
And what did you have to do? Go into a swimming pool?
Yeah, well, Tor did, because Tor was such a huge man. But I was at the church. They put me in a what do you call, like a tub, so that, you know, and they poured this water over you and they baptized you. But Tor, swimming pool, and Ed Wood as well. Ed took the pool.
The location was at a soundstage near Western and Santa Monica. I walked down this very musty, narrow alley to where I found this little small soundstage ensconced in behind these buildings. It's just a tiny soundstage.
It had good sound facilities. You didn't hear the street noise. You didn't hear the planes. It was well insulated.
I walked through the doors, and I found that the crew working, setting lights, and there were a number of Ed Wood's actors and performers milling around talking, and as I looked around, I could see that they had put all the sets inside this one soundstage, including the graveyard. The set that was to be my patio in my house was pretty well, it was pretty well okay, but the rest of the sets looked like a amateurish 6th grade play.
It's safe to say that most actors or technicians reporting for work at Quality for the first time were taken aback by the studio's hidden-away location and small size. This is Quality Studios today, tightly sandwiched between a strip club and an apartment building that, at the time Plan 9 was made, was called the Harvey Hotel. Quality rented out its stages to low-budget producers throughout the 40s and 50s, but no one who worked there on Plan 9 from Outer Space had gone anywhere near it in almost 35 years. Locating it for this documentary was a challenge, but by searching the neighborhood street by street, it was finally rediscovered.
At that time, the neighborhood where Quality Studios was located was like, you know, it would be, if you were just walking by there on a evening's walk or something, a very depressing place. But when Ed Wood's company would be shooting there, the whole block came alive. I mean, you know, he was always a lively person, and everybody else was happy around him. And suddenly, the whole block took on a whole new character, you know, and everybody would be milling about, and people would be walking off the streets to look at what's going on there, because it was such an unlikely place for a studio in the first place. But a lot of work got accomplished there.
My name is Romas Yasikonis. I'm the owner of this property here on Santa Monica Boulevard in Hollywood. It was formerly called Quality Studios.
Do you know who owned it before that? Who did you buy it from?
Yes, I bought it from Falcon Sound Studios. The owner of the Falcon Sound Studio was Hovey Kalikian. And he's the one that built the studio. This was nothing but an empty shell prior to him taking over. But when I bought the property, he was in here ready. It was still open. He only had one sound room. And he continued on until he put lots of sound rooms in here.
What did he tell you about the history of the building?
He told me that this was previously used as a sound stage. They were making various types of movies in here before he took over, and the building was really empty, and He did all the additions and soundproofed rooms himself with the stages. It was a movie theater back in the old Hollywood days. This was, I guess, 20s and 30s, way back. The last tenant that occupied this was another studio called Shamrock Studios. And of course...
What did they do?
They had bands come in here and rehearse.
What are your future plans for the building?
I might turn it into a swap meet.
It's tough to find something when you don't know what you're looking for.
Actor Conrad Brooks, on the left, played Jamie opposite Paul Marco's Kelton the Cop in Plan 9 cemetery scenes. He was kind enough to lead the Plan 9 companion on a tour of Quality Studios today.
Well, that's strange. Years ago, they had a huge sign up there called Quality Pictures.
Really?
Not there now. Of course, now that's going back, well, let's see, remember now. I gotta check this place out. The Harvey Hotel to the right.
Who used to stay at the Harvey Hotel?
Well, let's see. Mostly show people. No big stars. Mostly, you know, bit actors, people who played supporting roles, and technicians, and a lot of showgirls.
And next door we've got a bar. What's it called?
It's called Gold Diggers now, which is 1991. This back 52 was also called then the Gold Diggers. Eddie Wood's favorite place. He loved his martinis. Good. Now, we're ready to go?
Yeah,
Oh boy, am I in for a surprise?
Let's bring back any memories, Conrad?
Yes, quite a few. Now, as I recall, the shadow here against the wall here, it's sealed right now. But actually, there was a small office here, and there was one to the right of me. I don't remember this here. This was sealed off here. This must have been recently put up, or there's no opening at all before.
Really?
That wasn't there at all.
Conrad, we found this on the floor. It may be one of the flying saucers, although I kind of doubt it.
Knowing Ed Wood, if it was here to use it somehow. Well, listen, it might work. Let's try it.
What do you suppose that noise was?
Whatever it was, it's no more strange than the other things happening around this cemetery.
Now, this is the exact spot where we shot the graveyard sequence. And the scene was between actor Paul Marco and myself. And as I remember, my famous line in this scene here with Paul Marco, went like this.
It's tough to find something when you don't know what you're looking for.
It's sure hard to find something when you don't know what you're looking for. How's that, Mark?
He let the actors do it. He was involved in the technical aspects of where the camera stood and where the lights were and the moves. He was involved in, and he was deeply engrossed. One thing I noticed on that set was that everybody was deeply engrossed in his or her job. And when you're in a major studio, there's a lot of boredom sitting around, a lot of card playing, and nobody's paying. Everyone's clock watching. And here, I guess because these people were all trying to make names for themselves, they're all, checking their makeup or checking their hair or reading their lines, or they were all gung-ho to, almost too tensely determined.
I feel the most important person on any of Eddie's pictures was the cameraman, Bill Thompson.
I was very beautiful in that film in Plan 9. It was because of him. He lit me very well, photographed me very well. I mean, we may have seen a pillow on the grass that we weren't supposed to see in the cemetery, but he lit me beautifully. Before he started filming, he came and introduced himself to me and told me I was very beautiful and was honored to do me. Well, hey, now is that uplifting? Of course.
I saw a flying saucer.
Saucer? You mean the kind from up there?
Yeah, its counterpart. It was shaped like a huge cigar. Dan and Edith saw it too. Oh, it burns me up. These things have been seen for years. They're here. It's a fact. Oh, but what's the use of making a fuss? But last night I saw a flying object that couldn't have possibly been from this planet. But I can't say a word. I'm muzzled by army brass.
Character actor Gregory Walcott is one of Plan 9's more illustrious alumni, having appeared in over 60 major motion pictures and more than 300 television shows, including Norma Ray and Steven Spielberg's Sugarland Express. Walcott remembers that, for him, Ed Wood's style of film directing took some getting used to.
He gave us very little direction, and he was mainly just concerned about getting it on film and getting his shots done and set up, and very little exposition. He wouldn't get you off in the corner and help you to get down to the amoeba of the scene or the motivation of it. I don't think he knew what the motivation was, nor could he describe it. He just wanted to get the actors in a position where they would say the lines and say them where you could hear them.
Tragic.
Regarding takes, he very seldom would do a retake. If someone flooded the line in a scene, he'd say, shoot the entire scene. We'll just go over it. We'll just cover the errors in a cover shots, pickup shots. So he was not so much concerned with quality as quantity, as getting it on film.
Burbank Tower, this is American Flight 812. Over. Wouldn't surprise me any if he's asleep this time of the morning.
American Flight 812, this is Burbank Tower. If I were asleep, you'd never get on the ground. In your case, maybe I ought to leave you up there for good. Over.
You got me that time, Mac. This is American Flight 812 requesting...
It was the last scene that I had to shoot, the last day, where it was supposed to be a scene in a cockpit and of an airplane. And normally when I do a scene, I like to get to the set ahead of time and, for a couple hours and just kind of get the feel of it and what the choreography is going to be and logistics. And so I said to Ed Wood, where's the cockpit set? He says, well, they're building it. So I waited for, an hour or so and kept waiting for them to bring the cockpit onto the soundstage. And about an hour before the scene was to be filmed, two carpenters brought on 2 masonite boards and bent them into an arc and then nailed them somehow to the floor, and then they put shower curtains behind that, and that was the hull of the airplane, the cockpit. And then they brought in from the spaceship some various pieces of the radio set, and that made up the cockpit. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and the cameraman shook his head. He couldn't. It looked awful.
He was very busy, Ed, and happily so. But it seemed to be all camera busyness. And then, of course, he had his megaphone when it was actually rolling to give the immediate instruction through the megaphone. That always came through the megaphone.
Did you find that kind of comical?
I found it flowery. I liked it. I didn't find it funny. I found it rather sweet. I didn't know that nobody else was doing it anymore. I thought it was rather poetic.
The bullhorn, yeah. Well, yeah, if she was at a distance, why strain your voice?
Ed said, he says, I have some Martians in here, and Tor likes you. He'll be on the picture, Tor Johnson. And he said that you won't have to do too much with the bit parts and things like that. He says, but you may have to have some help because there are Martians in it. Right away I thought, gee, this is a challenge for me.
You have your report?
We had to pull in here to Space Station 7 for regeneration. We're returning to the planet Earth immediately thereafter.
What progress has been made?
We contacted government officials. They refuse our existence.
I don't even know why Eddie even used me, because I never got to do the Martians. He said, we don't have the time, we don't have the money. I was disappointed because I had sketched out what I thought would be best for these people, even the clothing. And unfortunately, I never got to do it. They came out with the barbershop haircuts and the Oxford accents, and And I did go to the sound man and said, can we do anything different with the sound? Because in the original drawings, I had the mouths, instead of normal like we have, I had them circled. And they would speak where they would articulate, and you could understand them, but there'd be a slight whistle, a little vibration of a whistle through the voice. And this could be done through the sound. Well, Ed didn't buy it.